Welcome. This is Straight Talk. I'm your host, Ed LeMay. We're coming to you from the campus of Massasoit Community College today. The purpose of Straight Talk is to destroy the stereotypes that are built up around gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people. And one of the ways we do this is we bring a lot of guests on the show, and so you can meet some real people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, or their friends. And to that end, I have a lot of guests today. There are 5 guests. So you're going to be meeting Alfred and Pepper. You're going to be meeting Cliff, Leo, and Pete. So welcome, everyone. I'm glad to see you here.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks for coming down.
Thank you.
All right. What I want to do is start with you, Alfred, and then go to Pepper. So we just say what branch of the service you were in and what you're doing today.
All right. Well, I was in the Army in the Berlin crisis, and though I wasn't literally out, I was quite visibly gay and met a lot of gay men in the service. And right now I'm a high school teacher, also out and very, very visibly gay.
Okay. Can you say where you're teaching?
I teach at Winchester High School, which has a flourishing student gay-straight alliance. It has a community gay-straight alliance for adults in the town, and a great deal of support from everyone in the town, the churches in particular.
Great. I'm going to ask you to mention the churches in a bit, Alfred, but thanks for introducing yourself. And Pepper, will you say a little bit about yourself, what branch of the service you were in, and what you did there?
Thank you. I was in the Navy. I was stationed in Corpus Christi, Texas during the Bay of Pigs incident. I was in the dark room the day Kennedy was shot.
You were.
And I had a variety of friends. And in your list of labels, I'm a friend. I'm a heterosexual friend of many gay, straight, bisexual, and transgender military people, those that I served with and those who are my friends now.
Great, thanks. I'm going to come back to you shortly. And will you pass the microphone to Cliff Arnesen? Cliff, will you just say a few words? Good to have you back, incidentally.
Thank you very much.
What branch of the service you were in? And
I was in the United States Army during the Vietnam War from 1965 until 1967, and as mentioned in the previous program, I had spent 4 months in a military prison after telling my superiors that I was gay/bisexual, and then subsequently discharged, given an undesirable discharge based on homosexuality, which precluded me from receiving any and all educational and veterans benefits, and it took me 10 years to get a discharge upgrade, so I now have a general under honorable conditions.
I'm really glad that you're here today, Cliff, and you have a very sad story. Well, when you're, will you tell the story about your stripes?
Well, I don't have any because after I was court-martialed and given the undesirable discharge, any awards or anything that you have are stripped away, taken against you, away from you. And I was a private in any case. I held no major rank or anything. I was in the infantry, and after I was court-martialed, spent 4 months in military prison, segregated confinement because the other prisoners had threatened to rape and kill me. So they put me in a small cell for my own protection.
It's a very sad story, Cliff, and I want to thank you for being here. Will you pass the microphone to
Most
Pete,
certainly.
and we'll hear from Leo.
Hi. I was in the military for 29 years. I only just retired last November. I was in the active Army for 3 years during Vietnam, but I served stateside. And after that, I joined the reserves and was with the reserves until just last November. During my time in the reserves, I served in Desert Storm for 6 months. And I also did a tour of duty in Honduras for about a month. I was a preventive medicine NCO.
All right.
And I only just came out three years ago, next month, after a long period of discovery. And so I served most of my time in the closet or not knowing just what I was. It's only been the last 3 years that I knew that I was gay.
How did you come to find out that you were gay?
I had these feelings that just never went away, and I decided to explore them. And after a period, I discovered that well, I was gay and I just had to live with who I was.
Excellent. Thanks. I want to come back to you right after we hear from Pete.
Hi. Well, my name's Pete, and I went through Harvard University in the early 80s on an Air Force ROTC scholarship. And then in 1985, I was commissioned to second lieutenant, and I was stationed at the Peacekeeper Site Activation Task Force. This was during the last few years of the Cold War, and the Peacekeeper was also known as the MX missile. So we were responsible for refurbishing a number of Minuteman III silos, getting the Peacekeeper missile online. And I served my 4-year term of service until late 1989, and then left the military, basically not for reasons related to my sexuality. I hadn't really come to terms with myself at that point, although I'd been aware of things since my teens. And then about 2 months after I got out of the military, the Berlin Wall came down, so everything in the world changed very significantly. And of course, in the 90s, the don't ask, don't tell policy was instated. In 1996, I finally figured myself out and came out as a bisexual man.
Excellent. There's a photograph of you here somewhere. So this photograph is taken, how old were you in this photograph?
That would be about 10 years ago, as I recall.
Okay.
I was about 26 years old.
Right.
And that was my, my first official file photo that was taken for my promotion from first lieutenant to captain. And those file photos are part of the promotion process. You're posed very carefully by an Air Force photographer so that you look as professional as possible. And then one of the things they do when they consider you for promotion is they look at that and decide if you look like the right kind of person to be promoted.
Great. All right.
So.
Well, so Harvard and this promotion, but tell us some more about your medals here that you brought.
Well, medals are often given out for a number of different things. I was given a medal as part of my unit in general for the good work we did in getting the Peacekeeper missile, the first 10 missiles active within the time frame that they were supposed to be activated and under budget. The second medal was for a special project that came up unexpectedly in the summer of 1988, I think, about a year before I left, where we had a crisis that came up unexpectedly, and everybody in my unit suddenly had to work overtime and fix some problems that were unexpected, which we did.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
I want to find out more from you about how you found out you were gay. I want to talk a little bit more to Leo, and be back.
Great.
Thanks. Leo, you also have some medals.
Yes, Ed. I have basically 4 rows of medals. I didn't wear my uniform today because I've been picking out on ice cream over the last couple months since I got out, so I couldn't fit into it. But I've received some various meritorious awards, unit citation awards. But I have about 3 or 4 Army Commendation medals.
Great.
My unit, after its service in Desert Storm, received a unit citation award. And plus I have a number of nice pictures too, which I could have brought, but
Great. All right. So thank you.
Okay.
Let's see. Cliff, will you just tell me a little bit more about how you discovered you were bisexual? And I'm going to ask this question of everybody, except Pepper.
Basically, I came out as bisexual around 19. I'm trying to. I would say around 80, 89. Just prior to the congressional testimony. As a matter of fact, one of the members of our organization at the time had told me I could not possibly go before Congress and testify as an openly bisexual person, and I told him that I'm sorry I was, and I did. But I came out as a bisexual person in 1989. After hearing some friends of mine, Lani Kampmanu, who put out a book called, what's the name of that book, Pete?
By Any Other Name.
By Any Other Name.
yes.
And Pete,
No play on the word by.
Story in that. Well, it's a 72 different stories in the book of bisexual people.
Right.
But my attraction towards men and women began in my teenage years.
So it was a long Process of discovery.
Process of discovery, and
Right.
along the way, of course, I had people say, well, you have to pick or choose, you can't be this, you're sitting on the fence, you're a switch hitter, all the old
Yeah.
things. But
Yeah,
I'm very
there are
happy.
people in the straight and the gay community that have problems with bisexuals because people in the gay community think that you're sitting on the fence, and they
right.
really want you to jump off on
Well,
their side.
part of one of the reasons being a bisexual on this program is to try and dispel some of those myths and
Yeah.
stereotypes. I believe that sexuality runs on a continuum, and even Sigmund Freud maintained that the human organism was basically bisexual, and the Kinsey report didn't have much on it, but I can tell you this much. There is a possibility there may be a whole lot more bisexuals than one might suspect. Approximately from my reading, there are about a million married gay men. And I'm certainly sure that there are many, many bisexual people who just haven't, discovered
Great.
their duality.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that from individual people too, because I so often think, what the radical right says is a conversion from gay to straight is really somebody who was bisexual all along and going through a phase of being gay. And I think it would be easy for a bisexual person to be married to a woman.
Well, you see,
and then later come out as gay and then go back.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because the religious right recently had the conversion therapy ads,
Right.
in which the BiNet, Bisexual Resource Center, put out a counter campaign against them. The truth is, posters. They claim conversion therapy. I claim that sexuality is both cultural as well as physiological or biological.
The American Psychological Association would agree with you. In fact, they say that it's unethical to try to change anyone's orientation, sexual orientation, from gay to straight or straight to gay. They said that there is no evidence that it's ever been accomplished in the long term. So you've got about 153,000 professionals there who would agree with you.
Not only that, I think that they would be counterproductive because you're adding on another psychological multiple layer on top of one that already exists.
Sure.
And I think it does much more harm. The religious right, their claims to conversion therapy are absolutely zero, based
All right.
upon scientific evidence.
Do you want to give your website to the camera? So people
Yes,
can-
we give two websites for
Right.
the New England Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Veterans, of which all the veterans here are members. You could call me, email me at cliff4vets at AOL.com, and the National Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Veterans of America, which was formed in 1990, can be reached at World Wide Web, GLBVA, HTTP //glbva.org.
Great. Thanks, Cliff. Alfred, I want to hear more about your coming out story and what you're doing in Winchester. And first of all, Pepper, thanks for being here. Why are you on this show?
Why I'm on this show?
Yes.
I'm on this show because I'm a heterosexual ally
Great.
of my gay, lesbian, transgender, and bisexual friends. There are several here today, and there are many, many watching right now. And I want you to know you're as supported as we can possibly make you. Call, ask what you can do, and if you need help, ask that too.
Pepper, I'm really impressed that I saw you at Gay Pride in Boston.
In which of the 4 units was I marching
Well,
when you and I saw each other?
I don't remember which unit, but how many gay parades have you gone, and why do you go?
I have been marching in 15 of the
Wow.
Boston gay,
Wow.
lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and
Allies
ally
Parade, right.
So it's
We're
been
going
a
to
busy.
just shorten this to just
yeah.
the Pride Parade. You know?
Yeah, yeah. As long as it includes everybody.
Sure. Well, I'm really glad to have allies like you on this show, and I'm glad to have you in the population at large.
I'm delighted to be an ally.
Yeah, and I'm glad you vote.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you.
Pepper. I'm glad you're here. Coming back to you in a minute. Leo after Alfred. So, Alfred, so tell me, how did you discover you were gay? What's your story?
I seem to remember since the age of 12, puberty, going from the 6th grade to the 7th grade. That's when I realized that I was attracted to boys. I didn't have a word for it until I turned 18 when I realized what the word gay meant. In terms of coming out, I really did it in the 90s when my school at Winchester High School saw a need to support gay, lesbian, GLBT youth. And I organized the GSA, the Gay Straight Alliance, because of the commission and because of the Department of Ed. And now we've straightened...
And the commission you're talking about is the Governor's Commission on Gay and Lesbian Youth.
Exactly, which has changed this state around. And the community, the town of Winchester has responded. The Unitarian Church has been the pioneer, but other churches, the First Congo, the Episcopal Church, even some of the Catholic clergy.
Excellent. I was very impressed with the website with the Freedom to Marry people. There are about 200 clergy from many, many denominations who are supportive of gay and lesbian marriage. So I'm glad to hear you bring up the churches on this story about gays in the military. I'm going to come back to you after I hear from Leo and Cliff, and the question that I'm going to ask next is, what about Don't Ask, Don't Tell? I mean, how does that make you feel? And Cliff, you were active doing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. How did you feel about that?
Yes, Ed. I felt that if it had been applied fairly and correctly, it would have been all right. But it seems like none of the commanders knew to apply it. The directives didn't always seem to come down from the top. They violated the policy by pursuing. Frankly, they never asked me. I never told them. And I basically kept my, if I had some gay material in my room, but I figured what I had in my room was my own private business. But I never saw any instances where the policy wasn't misused or applied, or but I had heard about other locations, and it always seemed to me like they were renegade commanders that just decided they didn't want gays in their organization. They were just going to go after them, regardless of what the national policy was. But what I didn't like was the fact that when they did this, there was no punishment for them.
So when they did pursue, there wasn't a punishment.
Right.
All right.
And as has been seen, we've had more people discharged since Clinton took over and implemented that policy than had happened before.
So the policy hasn't been very successful. I want to get people's opinions here, so we're going to go through the whole guest list here. And Pepper, I want to come back to you, but Cliff and then Pete.
Regarding Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, according to the Military Service Members Legal Defense Network, which is a legal-based advocacy organization in Washington, D.C., since 1994, when the policy was implemented, there have been approximately 4,400 and some odd plus people discharged under the policy. Last year alone, 1,114 people were discharged. The year before that, 887, at a cost of $25 million.
And what is the cost per person? I mean, what is the cost to train someone? I know if you look at the Air Force Academy, it costs about $200,000 a year to put someone through the Air Force Academy in Boulder, Colorado.
Well, I'm not quite sure of the cost, but when they mention the cost, it's administrative training, et cetera. But the policy as it stands, the reason people are being discharged at a greater rate now is that the field commanders and the base commanders we're not holding their feet to the fire. We must have direct orders from the top saying, do not ask, do not tell, do not pursue. That's what it means. This was a settlement, a compromise between Senator Sam Nunn, between General Colin Powell, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I give Bill Clinton, the president, credit for bringing it up, but it was his opening salvo as president, and he should have maybe put that a little bit aside for later on.
Right.
But I can tell you that the don't ask, don't tell, don't work.
Don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue doesn't work. Okay,
I'm
don't
using
worry,
a play
don't
on
worry.
words.
I know. Thanks. I'm glad you are. I love plays on words. Pete, and then Pepper, and then Alfred on your opinion about don't ask, don't tell.
Well, I can tell you that, I mean, if the policy had been in force when I was in the service, and if I had come to understand myself sooner, the Air Force would have wasted at least the $80,000 that they paid for me to go and acquire a very expensive Ivy League education that they then made great use out of. And I have, we can talk about my awards, but I remember, the things that we did, myself and the people that I served with, to reduce costs during the Peacekeeper, missile program, and all of that effort would have been wasted if they had decided that somehow my service was not good suddenly because of some fact about me that really didn't have anything to do with how I did my job. But I think the policy runs up against the problem that individual people don't necessarily change at the rate we want them to, and that if the institution doesn't try to make them understand what's going on and to change their behavior, even if it hasn't changed their minds, then you run up against a problem. I remember in the late 80s, there was a flap over a base commander on an Air Force base in upstate New York who was trying to put pressure on the wives of upper-ranking officers to do some of the traditional things that officers' wives did in the past, such as working at the base Salvation Army store or things like that. Well, this was the 1980s. Many of these wives had careers of their own, and to suddenly be forced to fulfill some very outdated gender role just because this commander didn't understand that it was no longer the Dark Ages was a real problem. There was a great deal of attention to it, but even after the attention had started, this commander kept trying to get these women to sort of regress. And that had nothing to do with sexual orientation, which a lot of people feel even more strongly about. So this is the kind of thing that we're up against.
Sure.
It'll take time. I think it's a terrible policy.
Great, thanks. I want Alfred's opinion too, right after. Pepper, how do you feel about your friends who are gay and lesbian in this policy?
Well, Ed, when I was in, during 63 to 66, I had the occasion to go to a court-martial for a young woman who was keeping company with two other women who were, as I understood, suspected lesbians. Now, this friend of mine was keeping company with them, was friends with them, and that was as far as it went, as far as I knew. I had a very difficult time with the anger I was feeling because the woman's personality, her truth was not being heard, only the fact that she was keeping company with these other two women. So I'm not sure what happened there. I do know that there were friends that I had in the military who were not heterosexual. That meant nothing to me. They were still my friends.
Sure. Is it easy to pick out which women are lesbians and which women are straight?
No. I'm
right.
here to debunk that myth
Yeah,
immediately.
isn't that amazing? I mean, so many people think they know who is gay. It's difficult. It's difficult to see a lesbian.
The theory of gaydar is only a theory.
It is, and a pretty poor one. Luckily we're not making any, we're not basing the tax rate on that something. Alfred.
Well, it's when I was in the service, I really don't understand what the issue is of don't ask, don't tell, or anything like that. They were everywhere where there were so many gay men. That for me it was a coming out process for me, but it seemed to be quite natural. And when you put 20-year-olds together with of the men together, you're going to have these attractions, and you're going to feel them.
Yeah. It makes it easier to discover if you're gay if there are only men around, I suppose.
And it certainly goes back to classical times, I mean, the Greeks did it, and why can't we do it?
So the Greeks were attracted to other men, so why can't American military be attracted to
True,
other men?
and win victories.
Sure.
Marathon, etc.
Yeah, I mean, actually Sparta, that was classic. It was part of the basic training.
And the Legion of Thebes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, excellent. Folks, this has been a great show. We've only got 5 minutes left, so I just kind of want to open it up to any pressing things that you want to get in this half hour. Go ahead,
I'd
Cliff.
like to make one little note also about the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. Straight people are being discharged under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy as well. I've heard stories that a person, as an example, a person being, a woman being accused of being lesbian because she won't put out for a superior, and immediately they point to, oh, she's lesbian, and in fact she could be straight but just doesn't like to. So this policy does not only affect gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people, it affects all military people in the service.
Actually, all discrimination impacts all people because, as we say, you know, in the Governor's Commission among students, it's discrimination against students who are gay or appear to be gay. And in some cases, you don't have to be gay, just be accused of being gay.
And I'd also like to add, at a time, the New York Times reported that all the armed forces are basically having a hard time meeting their recruitment requirements, yet every day 3 or 4 gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people are being discharged. It makes no sense. The don't ask, don't tell, don't work, won't work, and never will work. We have to hold, at this point, we can't win at the Supreme Court. It's too conservative. So what we have to do is a national appeal of all organizations, the National Organization for Women, National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, Service Members Legal Defense Network, HRC, to come together and try and repeal this detestable policy.
Thanks for your strong words. Do you have anything to add to that, Leo, from your personal point of view?
Well, I would say the most important reason for me to have joined the military was to serve my country. And I know that pretty much that's why gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people have also joined. And it's a disservice to our country if we get kicked out after, spending all the taxpayers' money.
Absolutely.
Why don't they just let us stay there? I mean, we're not really harming anyone. We're not in to find a date, as someone once said. We're there to serve our country and and to do a job.
Yeah, it makes about as much sense to discriminate against gentlemen who prefer blondes because it really is a question about preference.
Barry?
So, and we're just about out of time, but Barry Goldwater.
Barry Goldwater, God bless him, he said, before he died, he said, who cares whether you're gay or straight, as long as you can shoot straight? And that was something that struck me because of how Barry Goldwater was. He wanted to drop the atomic bomb over there, et cetera.
Barry Goldwater is one of my favorite conservatives. It's his grandson or something that's gay, right?
But most certainly, this policy is a ruination of many, many people's lives.
Absolutely.
And it has to go.
So we're ruining hundreds of lives of people who only came to serve, and as a payment, your life is ruined.
Your life is ruined.
So it's a policy that kind of opens up the military, a very honorable institution, to witch hunters. And I have to sign off, so we're going to have you back. Hold that thought for 6 months or 3 months. We'll have you back as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, folks. This has been Straight Talk. I'm your host, Ed LeMay. We've been coming to you from Massasoit Community College in Brocton. Please send your suggestions to Massasoit Community College, 1 Massasoit Boulevard, Brocton, Mass. 02302, or call me, 617-727-1740, extension 1679. My email address is mccgsa@aol.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Welcome. This is Straight Talk. I'm your host, Ed LeMay. We're coming to you today from the campus of Massasoit Community College in Brocton, Massachusetts. Straight Talk is a show that brings you real gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people and their allies. Today, my guest is Cliff Arnesen. Cliff is president of the New England Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Veterans. So Cliff, welcome. It's really good to have you here.
Thank you, Ed. How are you?
I'm good. So your trip here was fine?
Very fine.
Good. You live in Boston.
Live in Everett.
Great. And here we are. We're going to go through a lot of geography and a lot of history in these next few minutes, and I'm just so glad you could be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and you and I have worked on this for a long time, and it's come to fruition.
Yeah, it has. So, Cliff, I was really impressed with the number of hands that you've shaken, and the stature of those people. But before we get to all of these people, let's just say, a few words about you, if you would introduce yourself and say what the New England Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Veterans do.
Basically, we're an advocacy organization, and we deal with the issues of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy that was implemented by Congress and President Clinton and Sam Nunn. And we have social gatherings, and we're a support network for gay, lesbian, and bisexual and transgender veterans.
Excellent. Later on in the show, I'm going to have you give your phone number. But right now, let's talk a little bit more about you and how your route to the presidency of the New England Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Veterans. And actually, I'd like to start with a very famous photograph, you with a very famous person, and it's a good way to introduce the young Cliff. So will you tell me a little bit about this photo of you with Eleanor Roosevelt?
Eleanor Roosevelt, at the age of 4, I was sent to an orphanage by my parents. My father was an alcoholic, and I was sent to an orphanage to get me out of a dysfunctional home environment. After leaving the orphanage, I went to the Wiltwick School for Boys, which was founded by Eleanor Roosevelt, which was back in 1959. And two of the alumni of that school also former heavyweight championship boxer Floyd Patterson and Claude Brown, who wrote the 1965 bestseller Man-Child in the Promised Land. But Eleanor Roosevelt and I happened to meet because every year she would throw picnics at her estate in Hyde Park, New York. And that photograph is of us holding hands at one of those picnics.
And so this is you at Hyde Park?
That's me at Hyde Park. I was 11 years old in that photo.
Did you realize at that point that Eleanor Roosevelt would be such a friend to the gay, lesbian, bisexual community?
That's it's an interesting question. Ironically, now that we do know substantiated facts bear out that Eleanor Roosevelt was indeed bisexual, as I am, with her relationship with Leonora Hickok. It's an ironic twist of fate that you have two bisexuals holding hands.
So long ago.
So long ago.
Right.
I'm
and
dating
so far
myself.
Away. Yeah, well, we all date ourselves, unfortunately, especially in shows like this.
Yes, Eleanor threw the picnics for the boys, and I went up to her estate every summer, and we became very good friends.
Excellent. Let's skip ahead to this photo of you in the Army. This is December 1965.
Yes.
How did you end up in the Army?
I went to the Army because of the dysfunctional home environment that I was in. Alcoholic father, my mother and I were on welfare. I had nowhere to turn. I dropped out of the last of the 9th grade, the beginning of the 10th grade, to join the Army to get away from these oppressive socioeconomic conditions that existed at home, along with an alcoholic father who I had to be constantly on guard against, who was violent.
I just want to make it clear for the audience, our viewing audience, does your father or your mother and the alcoholism have anything to do with your sexual orientation?
No. I knew that I was attracted to children of my own agenda when I was at Wiltwick. I was 11 years old. My mother would take me to Coney Island when I was around 7, and I would watch the boys and the girls. And so I've been aware of my sexuality, dual sexuality, if you will, since I was around 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah, and I think people have a misconception, you know, that because you're bisexual, it's just that homosexuality is kind of a station on the way to becoming straight. And so that people, I think some people have the conception that, well, first of all, you're gay, and then you're bisexual, and then you're straight. Will you just set people straight about that?
I'd like to set them straight.
Yes.
I think that sexuality runs on a continuum. I've known since I was 8 or 9, as I'd mentioned, that I liked and was attracted to both boys and girls. My first love of my life was a man whom I met in Albany, New York, when I lived there in 1972. His name was Donald Alfred, and he was my first love of my life. And a very intense, very beautiful, wonderful love. Presently, I live with a woman, Claudia, and we've been together 8 years, and I love her very much. I don't defend my bisexuality to anyone simply because this is who I am, and I go by the quote, "I am who I am."
And it's very, I really think that we want everyone to stay out of our attractions, you know, that because straight people get to marry whoever they're attracted to, and they get to establish a primary relationship with whoever they're attracted to.
Absolutely. I think love is where you find it. In this world, I've known people who have never loved at all. But in regards to sexuality, I have constantly, since the age of 8, had crushes on boys and girls.
That's excellent. And at the time, you were having crushes on boys and girls, and you were a boy and girl,
Yes.
boy at the time.
Right. I was an altar boy. I'm Roman Catholic. I was an
Okay.
altar boy, and I had a crush on the altar boy next to me for many
Excellent.
years.
Great.
And if I had told them, they probably would have run me out of the church.
All right. Well, they still may, now that you're on TV. So, Cliff, it's you're quite an activist, and I just want to establish that side of your personality, because here we have a couple of photographs of you during the Vietnam War. This was Veterans Against the War in Vietnam. So, will you talk about these photos? Anarchy cannot be permitted in the USA. Fight communism, and
Yes, this photograph, I don't know which camera angle can see
Yeah.
that. That was
We'll get
taken on Park Avenue in New York City in 1968, which was after we marched from Central Park, Sheep Meadow, to protest the war. That day, in particular, was a very violent day. Some people had been burning their draft cards, and the police moved in swiftly on horseback, and I almost got crushed between maybe 20,000 people. But I was an anti-war activist after I was discharged from the United States military. As I had mentioned to you previously, I enlisted in the service to get out of a dysfunctional family environment, an alcoholic father. But I realized when I got into the military, I had made a terrible mistake, because 2 issues came to mind. Basically, one was a moral one, being could I actually kill somebody in combat, and the second one being my attraction and my affection towards the other male soldiers.
I wanted to ask you about that. Weren't you afraid, you know, knowing that you were bisexual and attracted to men, weren't you afraid? Back in the early 60s, gay people weren't in the Army as far as we knew. It certainly wasn't an issue. You mentioned the don't ask, don't tell, but that's, you know, 30 years later. So what was the situation when you decided to go into the Army?
In terms of the
Being
discharged?
No,
or-
being bisexual.
Oh, I was well aware that the military had a policy that stated that if you were
Did they
homosexual-
ask you, in fact?
Yes, when I went to sign up at 42nd Street in Times Square, no
Okay.
less, at a little booth,
I know
the
that booth.
questionnaire says, are you, or have you ever had relationships with a person of the same sex? And of course I lied. And that's used later on to get you for perjury.
So that's a no-win question.
Absolutely.
There's no way you can answer that
So of course
question and win.
I denied it.
Right. What was your feelings while you were in the service? I mean, what?
I was torn. My mother had cancer. She was dying of cancer. I was in a situation, as I said, those two major points. Morally, I didn't think, this was at the height of the war. The war was just escalating. President Johnson was sending, I think at the time I went in, there were 200,000 troops in Vietnam. And I really had serious questions as to, could I kill someone? And I shuddered to think, but the other was being next to soldiers that I felt attracted to. So I had very ambivalent feelings, but it was better than being in an environment in Brooklyn with an alcoholic father who was very threatening to both myself and my mother.
So, so you saw the Army as a way
out. But in essence, I jumped from the frying pan into the fire.
Okay, will you talk about the Army and in what way was the Army like the fire? What happened while you were in the service?
I had to suppress the feelings that I felt, my attractions towards the other soldiers. And I found it increasingly difficult all the time being in close quarters. Now, as you know, later on, Sam Nunn argued this same point. Most gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people can handle that. But it puts an undue amount of stress and pressure on that individual. I decided after basic training, I had gone through basic training, advanced infantry school. I received a military high school diploma because I had been a high school dropout in order to get in. And then based on my record, I was recommended by my superiors to attend trainee leadership school. And that's when I decided, and also my unit shipped out to Vietnam. When I went to my base commander, I told him that I was gay initially, but after that, the base commander sent me to a psychiatrist and a priest. The priest told me that God would forgive me for the sin, quote, and the psychiatrist agreed that I was bisexual based upon my past experiences with the same gender. So having said that, I was court-martialed and I was sentenced to 1 year at hard labor in the military prison at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And I spent 4 months in segregated confinement in a 9x12 cell because the other prisoners had threatened to rape and kill me.
What were you thinking about when you were in that cell?
I thought it was unfair. I thought that my country had betrayed me. I guess at 17, I didn't fully understand or recognize the stigma of an undesirable discharge, which they finally gave me after I was served the 4 months in the prison. It was a very, very frightening experience. People had threatened to kill me. They told me that when the lights went out to be careful because they would stab me or they would take me out and hang me. And I was a nervous wreck, to tell you the truth.
It sounds awful.
It's awful because I wanted to do something with my life. As I had mentioned, my mother had cancer, and I thought the military was a way of also sending some money home to them. We were on welfare, and my father paid $25 a week for child support, but that was if we could find my father because he was always drunk in some bar.
Cliff, it's an amazing odyssey. You know, I just want to commend you for your resiliency and for being here. And let's turn in the last half of this show to some of the most positive things. You had mentioned the Vietnam War protest in the 60s, and then here you are in South Boston, the Irish and American Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual group of Boston. So you were marching in the St. Patrick's Day Parade.
Right. That was my payback to the military. And to show the inclusiveness of people. I wore my uniform in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. That day there were over 500,000 people there. They spit on us, they threw rocks, they threw smoke bombs, they threw ice cubes, they threw beer bottles. We had a police escort of 120 heavily armed SWAT team members from the Boston Police Department. We had 12 undercover detectives, and we had 20 motorcycle escorts. At the end of the parade, through the 5-mile route that we traveled, some people put blankets over their children's heads in order for them not to see us. And I thought that was a shame, but I did turn a corner and I saw an African-American policeman give me the thumbs up. I don't know who the fellow was, but I smiled when he did that.
Could have been
And
our own Norman Hill
at
of the Gay
the-
Officers Action League.
Yeah, it might have been. But at the end, we also found out the police had discovered a plot by 30 or so teenagers to attack us at the end of the finish line. And it was thwarted, thank God, for the Boston Police Department. Because at the end we had 2 shuttle vans which they pushed us into, and they took us directly to the Arlington Street Church where we met with Counselor David Sconders. But
What message do you think the kids were getting if their parents put a blanket over their head so they wouldn't see gay people? But what message do you think other gay and lesbian kids got in that crowd who were watching the St.
I
Patrick's
think
Day
that by
parade?
wearing my uniform in there, that some child might have asked his mother or her mother or father, "Dad, did you see that guy in the uniform?" And they possibly bring up the discussion about, "Oh, boy, I didn't know bisexual." Well, to them would be gay because
Right.
they wouldn't know the
Right.
distinction.
Sure.
But they might even talk about the issue.
Yeah.
You know, because all little kids play soldier. I want to be
Yeah.
soldier when I grow up.
You know, I can't help thinking if I was a child in that crowd and I was gay, because I was gay, but it would be a terrible message to me about my own identity. So I just wonder what message parents are sending to their gay and lesbian and bisexual kids when they're throwing tomatoes at people like you. And how did you feel about those tomatoes? How
I
were
had
you feeling?
ambivalent feelings. I thought as a serviceman that maybe people would recognize the contributions that gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people have made in the military.
Right.
I could go on from George Washington on down, but I'll
Sure.
save you the time.
I think people
But-
can read the book, you know,
right,
Conduct
it's in
on
the book,
Becoming, and we do see a lot of people in Washington's Army who were gay and lesbian.
Right.
Thousands of people in this book.
General Steuben was one of General
Sure.
George Washington's commanders, and
Right.
he was gay.
Right.
But the message in the parade, I was filled with very mixed emotions. I was also very scared because we had had death threats, and they also had police snipers on the rooftops. So you can imagine it was a very tense situation
Sure.
with 600,000 people.
Sure.
But their message was, "We don't want you to see them." My message was, "I want you to see me, and I want you to talk to your children about your homophobia and your lack of acceptance." But I thought by wearing my uniform, it would start some discussion with children about gays, lesbians, bisexuals, transgender in the military.
I think we're going to have you back because I want to hear more about this story.
Okay.
Here you are in a uniform laying a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
Yes, I believe that's dated
It is 1993, May 4th.
1993, we went to Washington with the William Joyner Center Conference, which is from the University of Massachusetts. They advocate, they let us in. It's a whole structure of veterans, minority veterans. But we laid a wreath that day for all gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered veterans who gave their lives in service for our country.
Excellent. From the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, I want to go to the Pentagon, where we
Yes.
have a picture of you here. This is in 1997 on the 5th of May.
Right.
There's Terry Tobias, Mel Tips. So how did you end up in the Pentagon?
I was the national the national legislative affairs officer for the Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Veterans of America. We requested a meeting with the Pentagon White House officials. That's Frederick Pang, who was the Assistant Secretary of Force Defense. The reason for our meeting was to tell them that we were dissatisfied with the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, and to ask them to implement changes in that policy. Because since the policy was initiated in 1994 up till the present, over 4,400 plus people have been discharged. Last year it was 1,114, and the year before that it was 887 at a cost of $25 million. So if you were to take it all in total, since the policy has been implemented, we've gotten over 4,400 people who have been discharged under the military policy at the present.
And a huge cost to the taxpayer, but a huge cost to each one of these individuals who is serving their country.
Absolutely.
And so a person like you enlists to serve the country.
Yes.
And the country will not, the citizens of this country will not recognize you for who you are, and they will not recognize those people that you find the most attractive.
That's true, and it's their problem, not mine. That's why I went outside the parameters. I had been warned not to go into the St. Patrick's Day parade because it was, quote, a religious, but by the same token, it was Evacuation Day when the British were driven out by George Washington's army.
Right.
So I had every right to put on my uniform.
And I think what the Irish people don't realize is that there are Irish kids who are gay, lesbian, bisexual,
Absolutely.
transgender, and gay Irish kids who are in the service,
Well,
and gay, lesbian, bisexual.
And they're Catholic.
And they're Catholic,
Right,
right?
as I.
As you are, as I am. Gay
As I
vets
am.
meet with the Pentagon, and then let's move on from the Pentagon down the street to Congress, and here you are testifying.
Yes, that photograph is, on the right is Lanka Thomas from the Department of Veterans Affairs. On my left there is Ken Huntington, President of Texas Gay Veterans. And that's Mr. Chuck Schoen, a very dear friend of mine. He was in the military 22 years. He had 4 honorable discharges. They found out he was gay and they threw him out with an undesirable on his 5th discharge. But to make a long story short, I became, on that day, that was May 16th, I forget the date on that.
Let's see, is
yeah,
it
it's on
this,
there.
1990? May
16
16th?
May 1990. On that day, I became the first openly bisexual veteran in this country's history to testify before Congress on...
This is May 16th, 1990. Is this the one from the gay and lesbian calendar?
that I actually
this-
testified twice, once in
Okay.
1989 and once in 1990.
Okay, and I just want to read this from the Gay and Lesbian Calendar, which you can pick up at Glad Day Bookstore,
Bookstore.
or at We Think the World of You Bookstore in the South End of Boston. So in this calendar, it says, this is for May 3rd, and it says, on this day in 1989, Cliff Arnesen became the first out bisexual veteran to testify before the U.S. House Committee on Veterans Affairs, speaking on behalf of lesbian, gay, and bisexual veterans to the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. So congratulations.
Thank you.
You're a very famous person. You're not only in this calendar, but you're also in this calendar, Breaking the Chains, right?
That was
Broken
the Lambda
Chains.
Letter calendars, and
Right.
I want to thank Boyce Hinman and the Lambda Letters Project for their efforts on that. That gives a short biography
Right.
of my imprisonment and the service. I never ever intended to, I never thought that life would take me into this direction. It was in 1990 I had, it was in 1985 or 86 that I had heard of the New England Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Veterans, attended a meeting, decided to run for president, and I was elected. I was attending then Harvard Extension School at Harvard University. Because the funny thing about that, I never graduated civilian high school. I received a military GED from the Army. Then I went to Bunker Hill Community College, and Bunker Hill Community College.
Okay, don't mention our rivals on
I'm
this.
sorry.
This is a Massasoit Community
And
College TV station.
then after that, I went to Harvard Extension School, and I
Right.
was the only person in my immediate family to ever go to college,
Wow.
because I quit school
Congratulations.
in the 9th grade.
And you're one of the few people to have shaken hands with wives of presidents, but also with President Clinton.
Yes, I met President Clinton while he was in the North End having a cold cannoli at Mike's Pastry Shop on Hanover Street. And I slipped one of his Secret Service agents our letter to him regarding the don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue military
Wow.
policy.
Good for you.
They had snipers on the roof. I was afraid they were going to take a shot at us, handing, things over. But
Handing letters to Secret Servicemen, and
handing-
you got a letter
But I did
back
receive a
from Bill
letter from
Clinton.
the president.
So this letter is from President Clinton, May 21st, 1997. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And Bill Clinton says, throughout my life, I have sought to heighten public awareness and promote inclusion in order to send a powerful message of equality and acceptance to people everywhere. Increased opportunity makes citizens more productive, building stronger communities and a stronger nation. I believe that we must continue to help people rise as far as their talents and determination can take them, so that we can make the most out of our great diversity. As I continue working to end discrimination and protect the civil rights of every citizen in our society, I appreciate knowing your views. Sincerely, Bill Clinton. And this, and I, from Bill Clinton, but Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, and apparently something you've lived your life by. You know, so we've gone a long way here. We've gone from your court-martial in 1967, and that awful time you spent in prison, to your time with all of these congressmen. I just want to go through them. Gary Studs and John Kerry. Let's say, of course, Senator Kennedy, who has been one of our
that
supporters,
group photo,
and Barney Frank. Yeah,
the group
this
photo
one.
here. This was taken during one of our visits to Washington. This is Justin Elsie, who testified before Senator Sam Nunn's committee.
Great.
And this is my girlfriend, Claudia Van Putten.
Excellent. So Claudia
Is
and
right
Cliff,
in front of Ted Kennedy.
and here's
CNC.
Ted Kennedy, right? And these two people are lovers.
These two gentlemen are lovers.
Great.
He was in the submarine underwater. She was in Grenada.
Excellent.
And this is Lorraine Hutchins from the Bisexual network, BiNet.
Excellent.
And author.
Great. Perfect. We've got 3 minutes, and in these 3 minutes, we
Okay.
can look at just a couple more photographs. Tell me just who this person is.
That's
and how you met him.
Joseph Steffen, and I met Mr. Steffen while I was in Washington, D.C., visiting
Right.
with Congressman Gary Studs.
And his story is...
His story is in a book called
I think it's Honor Bound. is it?
Honor Bound.
Right. I've got it on my bookshelf. So.
This photograph is of the 5 original people who began the Gay, Lesbian, and Bisexual Veterans of America.
Great.
This is Miriam Ben Shalom, who is the first and only person, lesbian, who was reinstated back into the military.
Excellent.
And this is Chuck Schoen from Veterans Care.
Great.
Jim Woodward from the Texas Gay Veterans, and
Great.
myself.
Excellent.
And, yeah.
this very famous person here.
That is Rick Buchanan on the left, our vice
Yeah.
president, and in the middle is that's Carrie LaBelle of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force,
Right.
and myself. That was during the 5th International Conference at Harvard University on bisexuality.
Great. Excellent. So all of these famous people who you've touched. So Cliff, we've come a long way, you know, in these 28 minutes here. Thank you so much for coming, but you know, I just appreciate all of your odyssey from the orphanage and the hand of Eleanor Roosevelt to the hand of Bill Clinton. You've done a great deal. So thanks again for coming, Cliff. We'll have to
Thank
have
you,
you
Ed.
back to fill out
Most
the story.
certainly.
So thank you for your
I've been,
courage. Thank you for your service to your country.
I thank you, and I thank all my gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender brothers and sisters for their help and their support, because one man does not constitute an organization.
But one man at a time does. And
yes.
I want, on behalf of gay and lesbian people, and especially this gay person, I want to thank you for all you've done for our community.
Well, thank you, Mr. LeMay, and I thank all my gay, lesbian, and bisexual brothers and sisters.
Good.
And I just hope from here we can turn the corner and really get true equality in the United States of
Right.
America.
Thanks, Cliff. And thank you for watching. This is Straight Talk. I'm your host, Ed LeMay. We're signing off from Massasoit Community College. Send us your emails to mccgsa@aol.com or call me, 617-727-1740, extension 1679. Thanks again for watching. Send us your suggestions, and we really appreciate your tuning in. See you next time.